Good evening and welcome to the Village Board meeting for the Village of Pleasantville. Today is Monday, February 11. If you're watching live on Monday, February 11, we encourage you to call in with comments and questions. Our call-in number is 769-1677. As always, you can watch live on Verizon or Optimum Cable TV and at pctv76.org. And within a few days, you can pick up an on-demand webcast of this meeting and past meetings at pctv76.org. Couple of announcements to make, which I will keep brief because we've got a bunch of things to do today. And relative to the agenda, I know we have folks here who are interested in these two resolutions associated with legalized marijuana. We're going to move those to the front of our agenda because those are relatively short items. And if we left them where they were, you would all be here enjoying the public hearing and presentation on parking, which we encourage you to stay for, but we're going to give you the option to escape if you so choose. Just want to make one announcement, and that is I'm just back from Albany to the New York Conference of Mayors legislative meeting, and last night actually spent some time with some folks from the Pleasantville Board of Education who were also in Albany. So Pleasantville was well represented. They, on behalf of the School Board Association meeting, me for the New York Conference of Mayors, a bunch of disturbing proposals arising out of Albany, more on that later, but went to an interesting series of presentations, including one on the census, another provided by the folks from the governor's office about the framework they propose for the legalization of marijuana, and then a great deal of angst spilled by all of us about the governor's proposal to eliminate aid to municipalities for any municipality that receives less than its 2%, than 2% of its expenditures in the form of state aid. We already get a pitifully small amount. None of those numbers have changed in literally 10 years, not a single increase in 10 years. And so in essence, the argument from Albany is, well, it's been strangled for all these years that it must not be important. We'll just kill it off completely. In the case of the Village of Pleasantville, if we were to lose that state aid, it would be all by itself a half-point tax increase, just in the very same year that the same folks in Albany proposed to make permanent the 2% tax cap. And so they established guidelines that ask us to keep our increase in the tax levy to 2%, and then on the other side of the ledger suggest that they're going to knock out the support we've had for 10 years with no increase. That alone would amount to a half-point tax increase. So frustrating stuff in Albany, more later. So as mentioned, we're going to take these two items, our resolutions 21 and 22, and do those first. So Nicole, resolution 21.
Whereas the proposed 2020 New York State executive budget includes plans to legalize marijuana and marijuana products for recreational use for persons aged 21 and older, and whereas this legalization may allow retail stores to sell marijuana products in the Village of Pleasantville, and whereas the Village Board believes that the small scale of Pleasantville's commercial district makes it impossible to locate marijuana retail stores away from children's walking routes and child-focused facilities. Therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Pleasantville demands that any state legislation that legalizes retail sale of marijuana products also include provisions that allow the Village of Pleasantville to opt out of retail sales within the village borders. Be it further resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Pleasantville asks that Albany law and policy makers address the following major concerns in their further review of marijuana legalization. 1. Marijuana legalization and regulation should be addressed with standalone legislation. It should not be embedded in the executive budget. The process should slow down. 2. Legislative review and debate about legalization must include testimony from independent experts from medicine, neuroscience, and behavioral health, having no ties to companies seeking to engage in marijuana sales. 3. If marijuana is legalized, legislation should affirm the home rules rights of municipalities to devise local zoning codes that minimize community impacts on minors. 4. Legislation should restrict the sale of edible and vapable marijuana products, many of which mirror non-marijuana products that are attractive to minors. This includes products such as brownies, cookies, flavored gummies, hard candies, and lollipops. 5. Legislation should prohibit advertising of marijuana products and should specify child-safe, secure packaging. 6. Legislation should prohibit sales of marijuana to persons under 25 years old, not 21 as currently proposed. 7. Sale of marijuana products should require 2 official forms of age identification, at least one of which bears a photograph of the purchaser. 8. THC levels in all marijuana should be limited, regularly tested, and identified on packaging, along with guidance on dosing and text describing risks associated with use. 9. Retail marijuana outlets should be licensed by the state, presently referred to by the governor as a proposed cannabis commission, after thorough background check and sourcing checks. 10. Licenses should subject to permanent revocation for a single violation of any regulations and should be punishable as a felony. Resolved that the village administrator for the Village of Pleasantville shall forward certified true copies of this resolution to the governor, the lieutenant governor, the Westchester County legislature, and the state legislature, with additional copies to the Village of Pleasantville state senator and assembly person.
Is there a second?
Second.
We discussed it to some length at our last meeting. If there's anyone in the public who wanted to comment one way or another, I encourage you to do so. No need to do so unless there's something new to add to the mix. Any comments from the board?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. 22, Steve.
Whereas introductory local law 1 of 2019 has been proposed to amend chapter 185, article 1, wait, there's more, section 3, subsection B, and create chapter 185, article 9, section 45 of the Code of the Village of Pleasantville, prohibiting the retail sale of marijuana in the Village of Pleasantville. And whereas introductory local law 1 of 2019 was referred to the Westchester County Department of Planning, and comments back pertaining to definitions were incorporated into the proposed local law. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Village Board of Trustees hereby schedules a public hearing regarding introductory local law 1 of 2019 on Monday, February 25th, 2019, on the second floor of 80 Wheeler Avenue at 8 p.m.
Is there a second?
Second.
So, as you just heard, the intent of this is to post for public hearing, which is a step required by the by law in order to enact a zoning change. As we discussed at some length when we first talked about this the last meeting, there is the reasonable possibility that this step we have taken may get preempted by some act of the state. The way the proposed law in Albany is currently constructed, we would not have the right as a community of our size to exempt ourselves from sale. The current code, proposed code reads that counties and cities over population of over 100,000 would have the right to opt out, but nobody else. So that'll be an interesting subject of discussion, and one that was engaged in Albany, I think, by everybody over the last several days. Just to remind everybody, the text of this zoning change is included in the record, but I want to read Section 1, the legislative intent and purpose. Village Board recognizes that legalization of recreational marijuana is a subject of current discussion by New York State government. The Village Board has found that Pleasantville residents are greatly concerned about the retail sale of marijuana in the village if it should become legal in New York. Further, the board finds that the small scale of the village's commercial district makes it impossible to locate marijuana retail stores away from children's walking routes and child-focused facilities. Accordingly, it's the intent of the Village Board to prohibit the retail sale, distribution, or offer of consumption of marijuana in all zoning districts. Any further comment? All in favor? Aye. Motion approved, and that establishes the public hearing. After the public hearing, we will close the public hearing, and then, absent something that would cause us to revisit this, presumably would vote on it at our meeting on Monday, February 25.
How's that?
Sure.
Hi, Colleen Wagner, 3 Country Club Lane in Pleasantville. First of all, I'd like to thank the board for both of the resolutions. Greatly appreciated, and I think it reflects a lot of what we had asked for here the other, 2 weeks ago? So thank you very much. We appreciate your efforts and work and think it's a great first step. I've been in contact with Steve and with Nicole about, at the last meeting, we talked about having a committee. And I know we've talked about what would the purpose be, but I just again want to reiterate that I'd like to urge the board to put a committee together. Nicole couldn't be here. She actually took a tumble today and did something to her leg, but she is on her way back from the national convention where she was able to communicate with an awful lot of folks, particularly folks from the 4 states that have legalized marijuana. And without question, she said that the folks in the communities were unprepared for the barrage of information and problems that they had, and all of them, and Nicole will be here to say, encouraged her to encourage you and I to put one of these committees together. And I know that one of the statements has been, well, we have strong, but strong is in one lane for a very particular mission, and it isn't a mission that necessarily reflects the opinion of the whole community. And so again, I would encourage you to put that committee together. If you need help doing that, I would be more than happy to do it. I'm happy to serve on that committee, but I just don't want that to sort of go away after these resolutions pass.
Understood.
I have a quick question on that.
Sure.
Would you think it is a good idea to expand the remit of such a committee if we made one to include substance abuse of all types?
I do. I mean, it's funny, you were saying there's a cannabis committee, and I'm like, that's actually a great little name, to be on. But yeah, I mean, I think it would. I don't think the focus necessarily has to be that. It could be anything that comes down the down the pike that affects something like that, and that might be the perfect group. So should there be a change in vaping laws? Should there be a change in THC levels? Should there be a change in whatever it may be?
Or
that would be a
opiates,
committee that would
whatever.
be able to,
Right.
do some research, branch out. You're all busy, as I well know, but I think that similar to how PRAB works, perhaps, not that there's any voting or that they don't have any power to make any changes, but they do have the power to come back and talk to you about what they've researched and discovered, and perhaps have a better cross-section of the community. I mean, I think that the folks that were here and spoke out 2 weeks ago were definitely in one lane, and I know that there are people who feel differently, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have all of them together.
Yeah, I agree.
I think
I mean,
a vigorous debate
Yep. I
is
think
how we get
all-
our best laws.
So
So the
of us
committee
have
would not
heard
be
from some of those.
one-sided,
Yeah.
and I would encourage you to do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Yep.
John Muller, 52 Guyon. I just wanted to thank you all for what you did tonight with the resolution. Look forward to the public vote. What date will that vote be, Mayor?
February 25th.
February
The public
20
hearing.
The
Yeah.
hearing, we have to open the hearing on February 25th, receive whatever comment we receive. In most circumstances, if nothing substantive would cause us to change our course, we would close the public hearing and then vote on the 25th.
Okay. Just a couple thoughts. I echo Colleen's sentiments about a committee. It can be a cross-section, it should be a cross-section of opinions and people. We're probably closer, most people are probably closer than we think about this issue, because in the end, I don't know if there's anybody that doesn't want to protect kids until they're old enough and mature enough to make decisions on their own. The issue of Pleasantville Strong is, I'm a member of the steering committee, as is Superintendent Fox-Walter, Melissa, and Colleen. We're not allowed to lobby in any way, and that puts the grant in jeopardy, and it is a very generous grant of $125,000 a year, so we can't lobby. So the notion of having a committee is very helpful because, again, like we talked about last time, this is a part-time job, and there's a lot of people that are interested that would do the work for you. Just off the top of my head, I was thinking about Mount Kisco. One of the ways they've approached this is, I believe, and I could be wrong, I have to look into it a little more, Mount Kisco just decided to ban anything that was illegal on the federal level. And I'm not saying that's how we have to go, but a committee could take that information and distill it and come up with some kind of recommendations as to how that would look and how it would work. We are going to be presenting something to the board in terms of showing you guys how impactful this will be. Nicole did a lot of legwork of getting all youth servicing stores and entities throughout Pleasantville, putting them together, and then you put it on a PDF map and you show what a snapshot of how small we are, and then you take the business district and it gets even smaller, and then you add all the stuff that the kids are involved in. To your point, Mayor, about the karate place that just opened up. Okay, fine, put it over there, but we just opened the karate place for kids. So this is the kind of thing that really and like we've said from day one, one size does not fit all. We are not equipped at 1.6 square miles to be able to handle this and expect that the kids aren't going to be bombarded with images of lollipops and brownies and Rice Krispies and that are laced with marijuana. And listen, anybody who thinks that that's not targeted towards kids is naive. It's just naive. And we've seen it before with K2, which is a real big problem. I mean, there's only one reason they put on those labels, SpongeBob or, you know, Power Ranger, things like that. It's not to get me interested. It's to get someone who's 12 years old interested. So,
Right.
Again, I thank you for your work. We look forward to working with you in the future. Again, I just want to say what Colleen said is go, you know, really seriously consider a committee. You have a lot of people that are interested and invested, and you'll get a lot of good information. And again, it doesn't have to be, you know, the side that came out here in overwhelming numbers and filled the place up. It can be people that just have a different opinion. It's fine.
Right.
You know, nobody's going to, you know, judge anybody for that. It's just let's sit down and let's be responsible, Pleasantville parents and come up with the best solution we can for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would say, again, absent certainty, there certainly were a lot of folks in Albany saying they thought it likely that this might get pulled out of the budget process, as we have all requested. Whether that will actually materialize is not clear, but there were certainly folks from the Senate and the Assembly expressing that view, so that would be a good thing if it happened.
It would be a great thing, and I think that,
I mean, not really, obviously, a great thing in the case of this specific issue, but in general, this business of larding the budget
Right,
process
it's
with
not good
policy
policy.
issues is a disappointing force of government to begin with.
that's how the name of the Tappan Zee Bridge changed.
That's right.
Yeah,
So, you know, and to that point, you know, I think at the end of the day, efforts like this by our Pleasantville community coming out, it makes the state delegation take notice.
yeah, no doubt.
And I
sure.
think that creates a spark, and then people start saying, well, that's not a terrible idea. Why aren't we doing something like that? And maybe they'll start to listen. I mean, the first step is to get it out of the budget. The next step is maybe go so far to say, listen, we should have the right to local governments. I don't even care if the local governance meant that we had to vote on something to opt out down the road as a referendum. Let everyone in Pleasantville vote, and then you
Yeah.
live with the
So,
you live
I
with
mean,
the results.
It's an interesting story. Part of the presentation I went to today in Albany included a presentation by a woman from Massachusetts where the model did involve public referenda and offered it's a whole different model, including community host agreements and the whole 9 yards, but a very different model and interesting to hear what their experience was. But as you might imagine, the governor's office folks presented what they view as a persuasive argument that they're doing the right thing, and mixed into that is the fact that in my role as the legislative chair for the Municipal Officials Association in Westchester, in the end, through some discussion, we included the desire to have it taken out of the budget and to have local input as a sort of a big tent priority for the group, but didn't come to agreement among the various municipalities about what to say from there because of the range of opinion, partly because, as you already point out, we're all in strikingly different circumstances. So
We are. I mean,
Yeah.
if you listen to Carl Heastie, the senator from the Bronx, you know, he wants it to be taken out of the budget because he feels that people of color have been disparately impacted, which they have, with marijuana arrests and things. Well, there's no one here that's faced that, so he wants a bigger piece of the pie for those communities. So there's a lot of different reasons why people
Yeah.
want this taken out of the budget. But just, you know, to close too, if you look at New Jersey, 39 different municipalities have opted out. In California, which I never would have expected, 7 out of 8 that had the ability to opt out chose to opt out. So if, you know, the state delegation and the governor are listening to the people that they purport to govern, then they have to take these things into consideration. I think that, you know, what the Pleasantville School Board did was, you know, absolutely heroic. I didn't mention Shane McGaffey being on the Pleasantville Strong Steering Committee, but they did. He's on both, and what the school board did to start this off is great. And Mary has shared with us that there's lots of other superintendents asking questions about what we did and how we did it. And we don't even know where we're going to arrive at this, but at the end of the day, I think that we've gotten some notice, and the more notice we can give to the state delegation and the governor's office, it's going to be extremely helpful. So.
no doubt, and Shane, I'm sure, would agree with me. It was a subject on in every conversation in Albany. So it's, there's a lot of focus. So, and that's a good thing. So, thank you, John.
Thank you, guys.
Brian Bruder, 71 West Cora. Again, I'd just like to thank the board for passing this resolution tonight. Just as a reminder to parents that are out there, and I thank Mary Fox-Alter and the school board for putting this together, and it literally does take 2 seconds. But just a reminder to the parents out there of children in the school system, or not in the school system, that there's a link on the district website in which a letter will be sent to the delegates up in New York State, Albany, that outline a lot of the feelings that were discussed a couple of weeks ago and were outlined in the resolution today. So I just want to remind the public that it literally takes 2 seconds to click on that link. And, you know, John mentioned power of the people here, or voice of the people. That's a great way to communicate our feelings up in Albany. Thank you.
Thanks.
And tomorrow's a good day, school day, a snow day, right, Mary?
Yes.
So there's well more than
Time.
2 seconds to do it. All righty, I thank you all, and I encourage you to stay if you are interested in our next subjects. But we have a presentation by George Jacquemart of BFJ Planning. BFJ, as you all may know, has been a consultant planner to us for quite some time on a number of specific projects, and also on our comprehensive plan update, as well as the rezoning we undertook in the block that includes the post office. We engaged BFJ to take a look at our parking supply and the use dynamics of the parking, and for George to offer his insight as a transit planner to talk about the lay of the land in Pleasantville, and specifically the issues generated by the potential of creating a civic space at the end of the plaza by the war monuments and the loss of parking attached to that. So welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, trustees. I'll give you a short overview of the study that we undertook, and then I'll open it up to questions, comments, conversation. The map that you see right now is basically the map of our study area. We subdivided it into 3 areas, A, B, and C, basically to help with the data collection. So what we did, in each area we had one person that started, and this was on Wednesday, January 16, started at 10 a.m. and did a tour of all the parking spaces, the on-street parking spaces and off-street parking spaces in each area, and did the same tour every hour until 4 o'clock. So it's basically for those key hours, and we picked those hours based on occupancy surveys that were done in November as part of the Manville Road Improvement Project, where they took a similar survey, but it started, if I remember correctly, from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And so we picked the worst period for a typical weekday. We picked Wednesday. That tends to be a little bit higher than Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, because there tend to be more commuters going to the city as compared to a Friday, for instance. So basically we surveyed each parking area, and by parking regulation, you can see here it's broken down. The first item there is Cooley on-street parking, east and west side. The 2-hour parking space, 24 spaces, and then you can see on the right the number of cars that were parked from after 10 o'clock, after 11 o'clock, and so on, after 3 o'clock. We then color-coded, the very right-hand column to indicate those streets and those regulations that had high occupancies. The kind of brownish color is for streets or parking areas, parking lots that had on average 75% or higher occupancy. Yellow is generally less than 75%, and later on you may see some green that was less than 50%. Those that are not colored are basically areas that have less than 15 spaces, so statistically it becomes a little bit difficult to do that. But it's basically very detailed. I'm not going to go through those numbers. Here we summarize for area A, for all the on-street parking, the upper rows here, and then all the off-street parking. And then you can see for 1-hour parking spaces, 2-hour parking spaces, 12-hour spaces, what the average occupancies were and also for the permit spaces. So here, for instance, you can see that in area A, which is the area that's west of the railroad tracks, the 12-hour spaces that are in that area have very high occupancy, 98%. So those are the 12-hour spaces that are on Memorial Plaza and also on Manville Road, have the highest occupancy, higher than, for instance, the permit spaces. We did the same thing for area B. So here you can see, much more green area, meaning lower occupancies, green and yellowish. And again, we have done the same summary for area B. And it shows you, if you look at the bottom line here, for instance, for area B, there's a total of 330 parking spaces in that area. But the highest number that we counted was after 3 o'clock, so between 3 and 4 was 213. So 65% occupancy. So it shows that, like in many towns like Pleasantville or villages like Pleasantville, we typically have a core of the community that has very high occupancies. And as you walk out of that core, the occupancies decrease. So this here is area B. And then we have something similar in area C, which is more the southerly part, south of Bedford Street, that the occupancies are lower. So here's the summary for area C, and then here is the overall summary for all of the spaces that we surveyed. So you have a total of 746 parking spaces in this area, and the highest number that we counted, again, was after 3 o'clock, was 538. So at every time of our survey day, on that Wednesday, there were always a minimum of 208 parking spaces that were vacant. So there is vacant parking. And I know people don't perceive it that way because people tend to go to the core, to the center, and they drive around to find that last space, But the reality is that there is, a fair amount of vacant parking spaces. It's just not where everybody would like to see it. Now, a question comes up, is this Wednesday in mid-January, is that a typical period to do a survey like that? And I would say to a large degree, yes, because the major component that we have in these cars that are parked here are people that are commuting by train. So the permit spaces, the 12-hour spaces, to a large degree, those are people that commute by train. And that tends to be very stable throughout the year. In fact, it's probably higher in the winter months when people are less likely to walk to the station or not likely at all to bicycle to the station. So in that regard, I think the numbers are fairly valid. There may be a portion here, and we especially identified Washington Avenue in area B, Washington Avenue on-street parking, where we have fairly low occupancies, and you can see the 2 green cells on the right side, 36%, 22%. So that's an area where we have a lot of retail activity. That may be a little bit low. It's difficult to say. One has to go back in a warmer period, maybe March or April, and verify that. Here we found that it's roughly 53 parking spaces on Washington Avenue that their occupancy was in the range of 22 to 36%. So that's very low occupancy. So based on these survey results, and here we show the overall summary. So here you can see by area A, B, C, what the average occupancies were, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. You can see that in area A, the permit spaces are 87% occupied, compared to area B and area C. Those spaces have lower occupancies. And again, you see the 12-hour spaces have very high occupancy, 98%, and much lower in areas B and C, and so on. And then overall, the occupancy is basically 2/3. If you look at the total downtown, the bottom line is 67% occupancy during that 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Time period. we were asked to draw some conclusions. You know, what can we do, especially in view of the, I think it was 45 spaces that would be lost as part of the redesign of the Memorial Plaza. Can those spaces, can that loss be absorbed in the system? And our response is yes. And what we would suggest is to introduce some strategies, some parking management strategies that kind of disperse the parking a little bit from the core towards the edges, basically through pricing incentives and disincentives. So the basic strategies, like the first draw, shift some of the parking demand away from the core towards those areas where today we can see, you know, fairly significant vacancies. The second point here is that we do see an opportunity to add more 12-hour or 10-hour. I'm not sure what the reasoning is between 12 hours, if you even enforce parking for 12 hours. In my view, you know, 10-hour parking would be sufficient on Manville Road, west of the area that today has the 12-hour spaces. You know, up to the point where Manville Road turns as a relatively sharp turn, there is room to add 12-hour spaces. And in lieu of the 12-hour spaces that would be lost on Memorial Plaza. We also suggest that the village should implement hourly parking, paid hourly parking, after 3 p.m. in the permit lots, primarily those permit lots that have high occupancies, the Memorial lot, Cooley lot, and Wheeler Street lot. Because what happens there, if you look at the parking statistics, the detailed numbers that I showed you earlier, parking suddenly increases, parking demand, the parking occupancy increases after 3 o'clock. And that's because a number of parkers, they know that after 3 o'clock you can park for free in those lots. Mm-hmm. So there's a shift of parkers, and it's also to some degree the restaurant employees and bar employees that may arrive after 3 o'clock. And because the occupancies in that area are fairly high, we do suggest that the village should introduce paid parking, so in the meter or multi-space meters, and also on Saturdays, again, to free up parking spaces, to create turnover, and push some of the parking demand out towards those lots that have higher vacancies. You know, it's a strategy where we feel it's important to maintain parking spaces available at 5 or 6 or 7 when people want to go to the restaurant. It's important to have parking spaces that are open during those time periods. Change the 1-hour parking that's on Washington Avenue. We feel that it's probably more appropriate to have 2-hour parking or even 3-hour parking there, and shift some of the parking that today is in the Manville lot, that's a 3-hour Manville lot, onto Washington Avenue. The last point here on this slide, shift the village employee parking. The village employees are getting free parking. I'm sorry for the village employees that are here this evening, but it's you know, if you look at it, it's important for the core parking spaces that they become available for the shoppers and the restaurant patrons. We want to see turnover in that area. Mm-hmm. So, you know, we suggest that the free parking be shifted to either the Rebecca lot or the Hopper Street lot, where there is, you know, significant additional parking available. I should also note, you know, those lots are very close. The Rebecca lot is 1/5 of a mile to the train station, so it's a very, very short distance. I know for some people it may seem to be a long walk, but, you know, if you compare Pleasantville to other communities in Westchester, that's not a long walk, and it is, you know, it is good for the community. It's good for the health. It's good for the community to have more people walking.
We'll have you come to message that when we need you.
Yeah,
Right. So the last slide. You know, it is important to always to continue looking at upgrading the technologies for the parking payment and enforcement system. A lot of other communities are doing it. You know, whether it's paying with your app or cell phone, these systems, they tend to be very user-friendly. You don't have to have a pocket full of quarters and so on. So it is, and the users we see in general, they like that, even though parking may be a little bit more expensive. And the idea behind raising the fees is not that, we want to increase revenues, but the most important part from a business point of view for the merchants is to create turnover. Turnover is more important than cheap parking. If you want to read up on these kind of parking management practices, I recommend a book that's called The High Cost of Free Parking by Professor Donald Shoup. And he was able to convince a lot of business chambers of commerce all across the country to create turnover. And you can create turnover through paid parking and increased fees. City of New York has done it when they could not get the congestion fees approved under Mayor Bloomberg. They just increased parking fees, and you could notice the difference. Now you go to places like Fifth Avenue, where our office is, you see turnover. You can get a free parking. You can get a parking space. Anyway, that's the background a little bit about parking fees, and I know it's a very non-popular subject, but it is good for business to create turnover. So that is the key point. We also recommend that the village should have clear parking maps on the village site. A map that shows where are the permit lots. We had a little bit of a complication to find out which parking is where, because we got tables, we got maps, but nothing was very clear. I think you can make it very clear to all the users where are the permit lots, how much are the permit fees per year on each lot, so that the commuters can make a choice on where they want to park. And the same for the meter, the hourly fees, to show where's the 12-hour parking, 3-hour parking, and so on. You know about the Memorial Plaza, the development that's going on. We see there a great opportunity because that parking structure, they propose to build 140 parking spaces. That's the latest plan we saw actually today. And their parking demand, my view is that parking demand at night is even less than 140. Typically these apartments that are near the train stations, they have relatively low vehicle occupancy. And so during the day, there will be a significant amount of parking spaces that will be vacant and will be available. And as long as the developer for that project does not assign parking to individual apartments, meaning the parking spaces will not be signed for apartment so-and-so, that parking can become available and will be to the advantage of the developer to lease them out, whether that's rail commuters or whoever it is, merchants, to help with the parking shortage, the parking demand that occurs in the core of the village. We also recommend that two-way circulation be maintained on Cooley Street. As part of that project, Cooley Street is a little bit redesigned and the Cooley parking lot. And I saw a drawing that had one-way circulation, but I heard it has been changed. The latest drawing does show two-way circulation. I think the upgrading of Cooley Street will still be what I would call an alley, will be very helpful for the traffic circulation in downtown, provides an alternative, to Memorial Plaza, especially when people go to pick up when you have your typical pickup at the train arrivals, and also for the days when you have the market on Memorial Plaza. That Cooley Street will be very handy in terms of offering an alternative circulation. So that's our presentation in short. I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you for that. Much appreciated. And for those who are watching or here, PDF of the full report and the memo that attached it is available on the website. It's attached to the agenda for today's meeting, and maybe we can put it on the
we will. Yeah.
on the front tab,
Yep.
So that if anyone wants to dig into the details, not only is the cover memo, but also all the statistics are there. Let me ask, George, one of the things that folks say is these kinds of studies are a snapshot in time, and you chose the wrong day or the wrong month. You touched on that in a general way, but what's your overall comment?
Well, as I
on that?
mentioned, I do feel that overall it does represent a valid picture of parking in downtown. especially because there's a very high component of the permit and 12-hour spaces, which are basically commuters, and they tend to peak, in the colder months. When we do parking surveys in certain areas, like on university campuses, we pick the colder months because that's when people have a greater tendency to drive as opposed to walk or bicycle. And as an example, we did compare our occupancy results to the occupancies that were surveyed as part of the Manville Road improvement study. And that study was done on November 2nd, 2017, and our occupancies were, I would say, significantly higher for the permit lots. Our occupancies during the same time period was on Memorial Plaza was 95%, in November 2017 it was 88%, on Cooley Street, the permit spaces on Cooley Street were higher as well in our survey compared to the Manville Road survey. For the Manville lot, the 3-hour parking lot, the occupancies that were counted in November 2017 were practically the same. They were just 1% less than what they were in January. So I think overall our occupancy counts are valid. There are other factors like the movie center that may affect, depending on their performances. In the afternoon or late afternoon, they could vary, and possibly on Washington Road, if one goes back in March or April, those 50 spaces could, have a higher percentage than what we surveyed in January. That's a particular area. But overall, I feel it's representative.
And so absent the other, you've given us a number of recommendations to chew on. One point to note, and interested in your thoughts on that, is that we typically oversell the permits in the lots, but seek to do so in a manner that guarantees that everyone who will want a space will get one. Unlike some communities which will sell a permit which essentially gives you the right to compete for a space as opposed to the likelihood that you would find one. So we oversell at different rates in the different lots based on the experience of the occupancy, and in lots that are typically populated by permit holders who don't go every day, we oversell by a bit more. But it would appear, based on your results, that certainly in the permit lots outside the core, our occupancies are low and we could oversell to a greater degree.
Correct, yes.
And
yes.
I mean, that is important on a number of points, one of which is the capacity to absorb lost spots, but the other is we've got folks on waiting lists who would like to have one.
Right.
And it's an interesting, you doubtless know more about this than we do. We have quite a few people on the waiting list who will decline a permit that's available to them, say in Rebecca, because they're waiting for a lot that they perceive to be closer to their destination. So, I mean, it's just kind of an interesting example where folks will do what they will do, but they have an alternative of some kind that's better than the one we offer them, which suggests that there's some flex in the system.
I have a question related to that. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
do you want to speak to that first? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, you're right, and it shows that the pricing is not so flexible, so elastic as we hope it to be. But I mentioned also in the memo that maybe the village should consider reducing the fees for the Rebecca lot and the Hopper Street lot. Maybe not by much, but showing.
I mean, they're already lower, but
they are lower. I know. You can increase it a little bit in the core lots and reduce it in the other lots. That's a policy decision.
Well, with respect to the alternative, somebody in the audience, I won't name names, has pointed out to me some areas in the village where commuters are parking for free, and in some cases probably commuters who are not Pleasantville residents. One street that we've looked at is Tompkins, for instance. Do you have any advice about that? I mean, we're thinking about regulating in some ways some of these areas, and different areas pose different problems. So, for instance, next to the elementary school, there are parking limitations that are not always enforced because teachers park there, but then some commuters also take advantage of that. So that's trickier, right? But do you have any advice about how to minimize sort of freeloaders, for lack of a better word, but who are also, influencing other factors like people's, ability to shop downtown and so on.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I see Tompkins Street, Tompkins Avenue. You do have 12-hour meters, at least on parts of Tompkins Avenue. And there may be, so I think the answer is to install meters,
Meters,
on
yeah.
those locations. You cannot by law institute residential parking permits. You have to get it approved
Right.
by state legislature, so that gets a little bit more complicated. But the typical response is that on those streets to install meters, and even some communities, they just put in a meter that says, from let's say 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., which keeps the rail commuters out. It still leaves flexibility for the residents to park there and so on. So that's typically what we would suggest in those areas where you have abuse. And then for those teachers, you can declare a school zone, and the school should then enforce it.
Oh, have we looked into that? School zone?
Well, that would be popular.
Well, it has to be just for the teachers.
Understood.
Right. And then I had one more question. You talked about putting up a map on the website, which I think is an excellent idea. What about signage? Is that something that that would improve people's ability to locate parking, or?
I think your signage in general is fine. You have to stick to the legal signage.
Right.
Sometimes towns or villages want to have their own little, signage, but you have to stick to the legal signage. Otherwise, somebody who gets a ticket could get out of a ticket because they say it's not legal. So I think that's,
No, I meant just in terms of indicating the location of lots.
indicating
The location of lots.
Oh, yeah.
So the problem is, how do people find the parking? Because
Yeah.
clearly it's available, but one of the concerns is, do people know where it is?
Having a map like the one that's here that shows the lots with the name of the lots and the fee on them, that's basically what we
Helps.
would suggest.
Right.
And maybe a separate map just with the hourly meter fees. That will be very helpful for people that are looking, especially when you raise the prices and you can say, oh, I can park, for so much less at another location.
So,
Okay.
I'm wondering if you have an opinion about, being that Memorial Plaza is our largest and most visible and most findable parking lot. You drive into the middle of Pleasantville and you come upon it, it's there. For shoppers to convert some of those spaces to meters rather than permits, which I think would be a very unpopular thing, but on the other hand, instead of having some proportion of them, maybe it's 30 spaces or something, with cars there all day long for folks going on the train going to work, sell those people permits in those more diverse lots, have them walk to the train, go into the city, and having some spaces in Memorial Plaza available for metered parking for shoppers and folks going to restaurants or whatever it may be during the course of a day. I'm wondering if you have an opinion about whether you think that would facilitate or be a good strategy or something that we could consider.
Yeah, no, it's very important to have 2-hour parking on Memorial Plaza. And today, you have all of the commuters on the east side of the street, whether it's permit parking or 12-hour parking. The 12-hour parking is all commuters, they're there all day, and it has very, very high occupancy. And then on the west side of the street, it's 2-hour parking, and that's the way it should be.
On the street side, you're talking about on the street side of the
On the
median.
street side, yeah,
Yeah.
where the post office is
Right,
and
right.
Starbucks and so on. And so that has to remain as 2-hour parking. And I think if the village does increase the fees for the permit parking and maybe shifts the 12-hour spaces onto Manville.
But I'm suggesting taking some of the permit parking spaces that are in the lot
Right,
and making those meter parking spaces, which we have never spoken about. It was just, I'm listening.
That was
I'm
the case
I'm listening to you
15 years ago.
And
Yeah.
it seems
Well,
like
that's what Patty
maybe
wanted.
it's a part of the overall strategy you're describing.
You're right. And what I'm trying to say is that if you increase the fees for the parking on the Memorial lot, for the permit, and you can see some parking spaces freeing up, yes, that's an opportunity to have more 2-hour parking.
I feel like that folks that are looking for a parking lot that may not be able to find it are folks that don't come into the village every single day, whereas commuters, they know where the parking lots are because they come in every day and they park and they walk to the train station. And so making the more visible, centrally located area available for transient parkers might be, I don't know.
No, you're right. You're right. It is very important to have that, and I would recommend 2-hour spaces as opposed to 1-hour spaces, so that people have enough time to have lunch and so on. That is important, and I think you can do that. You can monitor it, and then maybe shift more permit parking to the Cooley lot. There on the Cooley Street, we do have 2-hour parking. They could be converted to permit parking as well. That's
Just to follow up on something Joe was saying, so when you look at shifting that demand to outside the core area, and you talk about a 10 to 20% rise essentially in the cost, in your experience, do you see? I mean, there's a subjective value to each of these parking spots too, right? Because if I'm used to parking 3 feet from the train station, and now I have to park a fifth of a mile away, that is maybe more than I'm willing to do. Do you know what that average has to be for them to actually bite? I mean, is 10%, 20%, is it enough to move the demand?
Well, it's a good question. No, it's a difficult. I think overall your parking is very inexpensive. You know, you charge per year. I forgot what it is. And it's just if you were to charge on a monthly basis, it would be relatively inexpensive, and people, may not a lot of people may change their behavior based on 10 to 20%. But we don't need a lot of people to change their behavior. We're talking about maybe 10%.
Right.
Of people shifting, and then you have, and that's why the map I think is useful. So you have also the newcomers, new people coming in. They look at the map and say, "Oh, there I can save money, X amount of money per year."
Okay, thank you.
Could I just, you touched briefly on the idea of parking technology, and we've grappled with that without success a few times in the last few years, largely driven by the initial cost to buy the hardware and the operational cost year to year. The dynamics may have changed a bit, but the last time we had a salesperson in here with a specific product that allowed pay by credit cards and the option to pay by smartphone app or to extend your time remotely by smartphone app, the salesman himself said that unless you're willing to charge $1 per hour or more, you will lose money by instituting this. So I guess my question, perhaps there isn't an answer to this, is at the time we had this conversation, some folks said, oh my God, I don't care how much parking is as long as it still feels kind of de minimis. I'm looking for the convenience. If I could pay with a smartphone, that would be totally worth it. And then the flip side of that, espoused by most of the merchants, is anything that involves raising rates is bad. So that goes to Shoup's book, The High Cost of Free Parking, right?
Yeah.
So I guess to boil that down to a question, do you have any sense for whether the win associated with parking efficiency and the metrics one gets from having such a system are worth the hit of raising parking costs?
I think so. Obviously, it's politically it's a difficult transition, but people do, and I see it also in my own behavior. Compared to looking for quarters to put in the meter and all of that, and doing it by app. The town of Princeton just changed their system, and I do a lot of work in Princeton, and there's Princeton Parking, the app. You download it, you look at the space number, boom, 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 boom. Yes, it was 45 cents more expensive just for the app, but it was very convenient. It was so that user friendliness is a very important element. Obviously some people complain because before they paid 50 cents, now you have to pay $1. You always get these complaints. People like to complain about the weather, the traffic, and parking, and politics. But
they don't complain about it.
We don't control the weather.
There are no complaints about politics in Pleasant. I had an interesting experience parking on First Avenue in New York City at a pay and display gizmo where the hourly price mounted. It was more expensive for successive hours after the first two. Which was an interesting piece.
Because
I mean,
blocking.
I accepted maximum time, and it was like, I don't know, $13 or something for on-street parking, and I was like, whoa.
But you paid.
But it's an interesting model that says, we're really going to try to incentivize you not to stay here for a long time, but we'll let you if you're willing to pay for it, right?
Right. Yeah, and that has been, again, that's what creates more turnover. Because before, where we have our office, the doorman, they had, they collected quarters and they fed the meters all day long. And now it's more expensive and they don't do it, but you have turnover. You do see parking spaces becoming available.
Right.
And so it has a positive impact on the business. It's not, as I said, it's not free parking that brings the business.
It's available
turnover.
parking.
It's
Yeah,
the
right.
availability of parking. It's a turnover that brings the business.
Very quickly, on the idea of we would add hourly parking into Memorial Plaza after 3, how do municipalities handle, in our case, people who are parking there to go to the city for a show at night or dinner or something like that? I mean,
It doesn't
there's a
necessarily have
trade-off
to
there.
go on all night long. The idea there would be to make sure that, let's say, the restaurant employees and bar employees don't take over those spaces, around 4 or 5 o'clock, and occupy the most attractive spaces for the restaurant patrons.
Right.
The patrons don't mind, they come, and so we generally, in those areas where a lot of restaurants, like Nyack, for instance, the village of Nyack, we recommended that they continue the implementation of the parking meters until 8 o'clock. So restaurant customer can arrive at 6, can pay for 2 hours, they arrive at 7, they pay 1 hour. If they arrive after 8, they have free
They're good.
parking. But by that time, the employees will be spread out, from the core of the village.
got it.
So that's the thinking. So in this case here, the commuters start coming back around 3 o'clock. Not many, but you can see typically
Right.
when you do these counts that the commuters tends to decrease and parking becomes available. And today you make the parking available, which is good, but you make it available for free, and that you can get better utilization by having these people pay, and then the restaurant, and then leaving parking free in the
Further out.
further out.
Right. And you guys stopped the surveying at 4 o'clock. I was just curious, why 4? It wasn't
Because
important?
from the survey results that were done as part of the Manville improvement study showed that after 4 it decreased. So that's why we felt we tried to work with a limited
Right.
budget.
I think
Right.
that subjective value comes back to play there, though, because there's a lot of times where people are looking to go to those restaurants and they want a parking spot right in front of the restaurant or within, 200 meters. And
Right.
Well, of course,
it's packed, right?
I mean, the reality of that is if one had a supply of parking to manage completely comfortably the peak demand at any given moment, in the course of an entire week, you'd have a whole lot of empty spaces most of the time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of the problem of sports stadiums, right?
Yeah.
But even for the evening hours, it seems like we could open things up. I mean, we've talked about the fact that on Saturday morning, there are 15 spaces that are taken up in the farmer's market lot because there are people who park there for the weekend, go to the city or something like that because there are no restrictions in place.
Right.
And so obviously that's not what you want in the middle of town. You
Right.
you want more turnover. So
And the knowledge that these other lots are there for restaurants and things like that play a
Right.
big role,
Yeah.
right? Like, we have to get that out.
Yeah.
One, I've commented about this before, but when we bought the Hobby Street lot just a few months ago, it had been owned by the Pizza Hut Corporation and was completely unmanaged for the last year and a half or something. You could have parked your car there for a year and a half and no one would have said anything. We put in 12-hour meters and the parking lot went from being 100% full every day to being 100% empty.
Oh, yeah.
So the 18 people who were parking there every day, every one of them decided to go somewhere else when they had to pay for it. So just interesting. I mean, it would suggest that there's, as you have already pointed out, quantitatively, there's some flex in this system. So
Right. So when we did the survey, the Hobby Street lot was occupied about 56%.
right. So
So
it's
half.
building up. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all right. Are there other questions? I thank you, sir. Very much
Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much.
Thank you.
All right. So that's another piece of.
Can I ask a question?
Sure. You need to come to
Gotta
the,
come. You know the routine, John.
Jonathan Cunningham, 14 Title Lane. I'd be surprised if any of you guys actually, the overall brushstrokes of this, you found that surprising. I mean, we all have a sense, I guess, that the core is tough to park in, and as you go out, it gets easier. And the results with our parking lots have always reflected that, you know. So I didn't find anything about this particularly surprising, except maybe Washington Avenue,
Yeah.
which at days in the middle of the day is impossible to park on.
Well, it depends
And
on,
other days you
you
can
know,
fire a cannon down and
heavily
So-
affected by the activity at the burns.
Indeed,
So, yeah.
indeed. The thought that I had though, and is actually almost 180 degrees different than what was recommended here about the lots, but it also dovetails with the parking meters, and that is the concept of maybe moving the parking, opening up the commuter lots to 11 o'clock in the morning, free parking for 2 hours, chalk the tires so you're moving people on, and because quite frankly, if you're commuting in the city, you've done it before 11, and why not open it to free parking, and at the same time use the opportunity to reinvest into our parking meter structure, which is in bad need of reinvestment. You know, you're giving free parking to the merchants in the way of opening up the lot, but at the same time, you're keeping it at 2 hours, so you're keeping people moving, assuming you've got some enforcement activity. And at the same time, we're able to put the meters, make a reinvestment back into the meters, which I think makes a lot of sense, honestly. I know it's not popular.
Make a reinvestment, I mean, that's just, we'd have to find some money to do it is the problem. It's like
Right.
$300,000.
Yeah.
So what I would say about that is that's an idea that's certainly worth discussing. It's come up in the past. One problem we have, especially in the plaza at peak times, is we have quite a few people who have permits who are local business people
Yep.
who come and go. So, for example, the White Plains parking garage, I think, is open to anyone to buy a parking space after a certain hour. In other words, it's massively populated by folks who are commuting to the city. But we've had some problems with allowing folks to use permit spaces for transit spaces too early in the day, and then find a circumstance where folks who are in and out in the course of the day but have a permit can't be accommodated. So that's
Right.
something to think about. The other thing is, perhaps you've seen it, I see it many days of my life, as the study already points out, at 3 p.m. it's boom.
Right.
Like there are a lot of people who are just waiting for the witching hour to come and get free parking. And if we said 11, I don't doubt that the same might be true. And I wonder whether that's,
at 2 hours though, so.
I wonder whether that's changing behavior in a way we need to do it. So,
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, at 3 o'clock though,
Free.
you've got free parking for, 18 hours.
The duration.
right, and that's part of our problem, as was just pointed out by George. For example, parking in Memorial Plaza is a great place to park for Pub Street or the
Yeah,
Greek
Pub's great,
restaurant or the falafel taco place, and yet your odds of parking there on a Friday night are not high, starting at 3 o'clock.
Right.
It's already full.
And as Nicole just mentioned, in the context of the farm market, we're now thinking anecdotally that there are as many as 15 cars in Memorial Plaza that are there for 48 hours and don't move. And likewise in the lane lot behind the post office, a whole bunch of cars that sit there all weekend. So
Right.
it's not that we wouldn't like to be able to supply that option to people who have the need, but when it's at the price of the availability of parking that serve our merchants and restaurants, that's tough.
Yeah,
So-
I mean,
Yeah.
you chalk the tires and it's 2 hours until time. And I've gotten a ticket, sad to say, at Portchester in their lot that's next to the Capitol Theater. And because they change that lot over from metered parking to non-metered parking to permit parking, seemingly ad hoc if you ask me, but I'm sure there's a logic to it. So,
You're speaking to the wrong board on that.
yeah, I
Yeah.
gather that. But I think there's the ability to, there may be the ability, you guys work it out, but if you want to make the lots 2-hour parking on the weekends, you eliminate those 15 people that are just
Yes.
resting their
Right.
cars there. And there's
Right.
no reason that you can't, because quite frankly, those are billed as commuter lots. And you're
Right.
not commuting in, the commuters, typically Monday through Friday, although that changes, but.
I mean, it's
Some
a
of
nice
the
No,
service.
I think I think something like that has to happen. I mean, the complaints that we get about parking are always the same, it seems to me, or are often the same. One of them is about the post office, which I have to say I've never had a problem finding a parking space, but maybe that's just me. I mostly walk, so. But
That might be
But-
why you don't need a parking space.
But, it seems like this is a problem that could be remedied relatively easily. So the problem not being so much the lack of parking spaces in the sort of generic sense, but the lack of mobility in that core area specifically.
The one question I had, and you may not be, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but the idea of making Cooley 2 ways, I was just down on Cooley, and if you make that 2 ways, it seems like you lose a lot of, I don't even know if you can have parking on Cooley, certainly not angle parking on Cooley anymore. So if we do 2 ways, has it been assessed yet how many parking spots we lose on
I
Cooley?
mean, the current number in the developer's plan suggests a potential loss of 15 spaces,
10 to 15.
10 to 15.
Okay.
I mean, the last shot has not been fired on that, and that is one of the subjects that has to be mitigated. And I think it's fair to say, Eric, you'll correct me if I'm out of hand, but we've commented before that we are clearly going to be able to arrive at a shared parking arrangement with the developers of 70 Memorial to the tune of more than 20 parking spaces. So good stuff happening there. And I think personally that Cooley 2-way, as George already commented, is a relief valve that I think is a big benefit in lots of ways, separate completely from any discussion of parking. But the other interesting aspect of it is it makes our lane plumbing lot, as well as shared spaces that we may have accessed from that side of the new building, a whole lot more convenient.
Yep.
And the happy public amenity that arises out of that 70 Memorial project is a massively improved pedestrian experience in a landscaped alley from, back by Mediterraneo up to Memorial Plaza with a public easement through what is private land improved by the developer. So good stuff happening there. There's some awkward aspects of Cooley, but right now, as you know, you can, it's actually easier now because some rocks were moved for the demo project, but you can get through, but it involves snaking through the lot. So
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
all right.
Thanks.
All right, I thank you, George. And are there other comments? Somebody else want to make a comment?
In the back, gentlemen.
Yeah, come on up if you wanted to comment. Sure.
Hi, Tom Schindler from 123 Great Oak Lane. I just want to comment on the parking study and then just make a more general comment about this space. So from a study perspective, I read it. I read what was online, and I think it is informative, but it doesn't fully address, I'd say, the commuter demand. So trying to mitigate some of that commuter demand by steps like increasing fees, right? 10 to 20%, that's not de minimis. And when you're trying to push people outside of the core, you're talking about people that are already commuting an hour on the train, plus getting to the train, plus what they have to do once they get to the city. So that pushing people out of the core on the commuting side, we're trying to do it by raising fees. I don't think that makes sense. And then the second thing I'd say is that from a demand perspective, just for shoppers, that's only going to increase, right? We've got multiple projects here in Pleasantville. They're in different stages of development, and the analysis does not fully address the increased demand that we're likely to see in that regard. And,
Demand for parking, you mean?
yes,
So just to be clear, any residential portion of that is required to be accommodated by those developments in their own parking on their own site.
right, but,
Right.
so let's just take,
Yeah.
the Toll Brothers. That's not gonna create any more demand for parking in downtown Pleasantville? Just because there's parking at Toll
No,
Brothers?
no. What I was referring, like, for example, the project by the post office. Sure, absolutely. We have more
Right.
residents at Toll Brothers, no
Yeah,
doubt.
there's no,
Yes.
I mean, we're adding at least hundreds of residents, right, if not more. And then, from the standpoint of the cost of this project and where else we could be devoting resources, one aspect that really jumps out to me is this is a project that it's
You're
really,
talking about the civic space?
yeah, the civic
So
space.
could I don't want to cut you off, but I want to capture that as part of the public record, and we haven't formally opened the public hearing on that subject. So if you're willing, you could even stay there at the podium. If we're done with comments about George and his study, then we'll relieve you from bondage and open the public hearing. So is there a motion to open the previously adjourned continuation of the public hearing on the Manville Road Corridor Improvement and Civic Space Project?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Welcome to hold that just for one moment. I just want to report that we've received a number of email comments, and Noreen has copies of them, and we'll add them to the record as well as to the minutes. Okay, welcome back.
Okay, thank you. So.
Now
this
you're
is-
official.
Yeah.
Right.
Just a general comment on the civic space. I'd say in isolation or in a vacuum, I like the idea of more civic space. But if we're talking about finite resources, which we always are from a tax dollar perspective, personally, I'd rather see resources devoted more towards other areas I think are of higher need. And I'll highlight one that impacts a lot of our kids in Pleasantville is the field situation. So the field situation in Pleasantville is very poor right now, just from the standpoint of availability because of the impact of weather and the poor drainage of a lot of the fields. So for example, I'll use one specific example. I run the program for my younger daughter in ASO, and we lost soldiers and sailors for approximately half of the fall
Because
of lack
rain.
of drainage.
Yeah.
And I like to see resources going towards increased availability of turf fields. So whether it's one or more over
You mean
time.
artificial turf?
Yes, the use of turf like
Yeah.
we have at
The high school?
high school small
Right.
and the main turf.
Okay, understood, thank you.
Thank you.
Bernie Gordon, 17 Brookfield Place. Good evening, everybody. I want to make clear that I'm not opposed to parks. Several people have come up to me and said, I saw you on, and I am concerned here about the consequences of the proposal for a civic park. Primarily the Manville Road, Grant Street, Memorial Plaza intersection, the internal traffic pattern at Memorial Plaza, and the adequacy of the right turning lane. Now, is this have the traffic study, or this is just the parking study?
This is just a parking
just
study.
parking.
You mean the graphics for the traffic study?
Traffic,
Yeah,
yes.
they're not loaded up there.
Okay. So I have some questions about the traffic study. There is traffic numbers given in the summary, and I don't know if you have it in front of you.
I don't, but we can open it. And just for anyone who's watching at home, all of these attachments are appended to the agenda in Novus Agenda. So if you click into pleasantville-ny.gov to agendas to the meeting of February 11th, you can follow along if you're at home. Okay,
HEA traffic study and
Which
traffic
one?
study appendix from
Yeah.
December, right?
right,
This is the summary that you
Yes.
posted, right?
right.
The first map has the circles of the areas studied. And they should have a circle there for the the slip lane, which they don't, because that was one of the areas that was.
Yes, you're right.
Now, the next page has numbers of traffic numbers. And I assume they're the cumulative traffic numbers of all those individual pages of the intersections. So my first question is on the slip area. It has 69 cars going in the morning and 178 going in the slip lane in the evening. And then at Manville Road, it has morning going out 508 and in the evening 467. So I'm confused as to what those numbers at Manville Road mean. Is that the numbers for the slip area and Memorial Plaza, because you don't have a separate number of the cars coming out of Memorial Plaza? Is that the total number of Manville Road and the slip lane? Because it has a consequence as to the numbers for the right turning lane and the numbers for the level of service that they projected after you close the slip lane. Do you have an answer for that?
So I'm not sure I'm looking exactly what you are, but here's my suggestion on that. If you just shoot an email to Eric with the specific question you just described, just to make sure we're clear on it, let's ask HVEA, whose numbers these are, to be sure we're all on the same page. I think it doesn't help what I think. We just want to be certain we're right so that you know you're looking at what you think you're looking at.
All right, so then we go to page 9 of the traffic study.
Is that the page that begins estimated 95th percentile queue length?
That's correct.
Okay.
So this is are these numbers the number of cars that are estimated in the right turning lane? Is this the number, what does this represent?
It says feet. 95th percentile queue lengths in feet.
Yeah, you can see
Meaning
how far it was backed up.
at the 95th percentile.
So, okay, so if an average car is what? What did you say, Joe, last time?
I think the 15 to 18 feet, something like
No,
that.
it's
So
not
you're
that long.
Cars are not that long?
No.
How long are cars?
I-
I don't know.
I don't-
I'm guessing.
My car's about,
My father's old caddy, I know. Right,
I would say it's about 100 inches. So
Maybe, yep.
Average length of compact sedans and SUVs in America are 177.2 inches.
Right, okay.
So 12
So
feet
that's
or
about
13 feet, right?
I was only up by
14, that's
50%.
Close, Joe.
So is that saying that that they've concluded in the proposed condition on the AM at Manville Road that there'll be 2 cars waiting at any one time?
So
Well, maybe 1 car at any given time. And in the evening, only 1.5 cars are going to be waiting at the Manville Road intersection?
that is what they're saying, yes. It is evident.
And if there's a signal, there'll be 2 cars.
It is evident, well, you've got 2 lanes. It is evident from the above that the 100-foot storage capacity for each of the proposed storage lanes is sufficient to accommodate the estimated queues.
Okay. Now you go back to those numbers. You go back to the numbers that before on the original map. And in the morning, you got 69 cars going off onto the slip ramp
Over a period of time,
over a period of time.
not all at once. Right? I mean, that's the key point. How long does it take for 69? Over what period of time? What page was that on, Bernie?
Well, you got page 9, and you got the summary is on page, I guess, the second map on the page summary. And at night, you got 178 cars that are going to go through that. Addition to what is already there, going through you got 178 cars in addition to the 142 cars. So you've got about 150% increase, according to the traffic study, I think, that are going to go through the Manville Road intersection. And they're saying that
To make a right turn. You're saying
no,
it's
no,
rather than go through the
total. Yes.
rather than
but,
go through the slip lane, there's
Yeah.
all the cars that would have otherwise gone through the slip lane are going to be going.
Right, they got 178 cars are going to make that right turn. and they're saying it's only going to be 2 at a time. So, okay. So I think that to me, it raises a lot of questions as to how this is impact. This is one of my issues, is what the impact of this is going to be.
So just to be clear, we're more than happy, as we have been in the past, to reflect these questions back. But this analysis and the conclusions they arrive at are the conclusions of a team of certified engineers at Hudson Valley Engineering, and then we took that and gave that study to an independent third party, FP Clerk, which you know well and has had a long experience in the village, and asked them to vet it. And they agreed the conclusions were appropriate. So happy to ask any specific questions, but we've got two
Yes,
firms.
I understand
Yeah.
that, and as you know, as mayor and a member of the board for 15 years, I heard a lot of studies. I heard about a lot of studies, a lot of experts, but I didn't think that they were elected officials that made the decisions for us. So,
No one is trying to hide from any decisions, trust me. But we are trying to make sure that we have good professional advice.
I'll say this. I may be sitting here, but I'm the first one to admit that there are a lot of fields that I don't know anything about, and traffic studies is beyond my, my knowledge base. It's not what I do for a living. It's not what I've ever done as a hobby. It's just not. So yes, I'm called upon to make a decision, but I do feel like I need to rely upon, and your comments are valid. I don't want to just, downplay them, but in these circumstances, when there's an area that I'm not personally versed in, or I can't judge them as an expert, I have to rely on the experts. In a lot of ways, you have to rely on the
Joe, I
experts
think
to
you got
help
to do
us.
is you got to call your experts in and grill them on those questions until you do understand.
It's fair.
I want to go to page 15 of the traffic study. And there's a statement with regard to the Memorial Plaza parking lot circulation. It says the concept of modifying the mid-lot access to allow right and left turns.
I'm sorry, Bernie, what page you on?
15,
15.
Thank you.
mid page.
Towards the bottom. The concept of modifying the mid-lot access to allow right and left turns out and act as a new entrance point has both benefits and unknowns. The benefits are a greater degree of freedom to move both in and out of the lot. The unknowns are what, if any, detrimental conflicts may arise from the change in lots of vehicle circulation pattern. Have you as a board pursued or discussed with the traffic experts what these unknowns are and how these unknowns can be addressed?
Well, you see the 3 bullets that follow, some of the traffic conflicts that could arise. So, for example, we have the circumstance right now, as perhaps you recall, for many, many years, there was no way out of the commuter side of Memorial Plaza except at the end. If you entered at the end by Bedford Road to the commuter side, your only way out was to go out the slip lane and up over the bridge towards Wheeler. When we began to work with the farm market about their expanded footprint, we cut an exit just past the gazebo, which created, for the first time, a way out that was sort of amidships. And at the time, we made that a right turn only lane. Plenty of folks violate that, but the idea at the time was to make it a right turn only lane because it's adjacent to a crosswalk, seeking to avoid the conflict of cars turning left across the crosswalk in such close proximity. So what I would say about that, just as one example, is that sort of falls into the same category, I think, as what HVEA is saying here, which is to say the concept of changing mid-lot access has both benefits and unknowns. No doubt it does. In the case of that change, I think the benefits have been manifest. Not only did it actually rejigger how people chose to park, because now it was desirable to park in the area of the gazebo or south because there was a way out before you went to the slip lane, and you had the opportunity when you got out, even if you obeyed the right-hand lane, when you got to Manville Road to turn left, if that's what you wanted to do, as opposed to being forced up over the bridge to come back and circle back. So I don't read this note that HVEA has made as anything other than what we already know, that every change you make has anticipated consequences and inevitably some unanticipated ones. So,
Well, I congratulate the board. I think that adding the curb cut where you did to allow
Right.
It was a very good.
yeah, painfully it lost 6 parking spaces.
No, I mean, it was
It's tough, yeah.
You know, it was a good change.
Yeah.
Here you're closing the entire slip lane, and if you're satisfied that there's all these unknowns about the internal circulation, what's going to happen, what the backups are going to be, we're not talking about exit, we're talking about circulation. If you're satisfied that these unknowns, that you're going to place the village at risk with all these unknowns with this project, that's your decision to make.
So Bernie,
I think that there's a lot of study that should be going into, a lot more information about what's going to happen in that circulation when people are stopped, waiting for people to be picked up, when people are trying to leave, and you've eliminated that entire easy access out of the lot, and everybody's going to have to go turn into the Memorial Plaza.
So can I just comment a couple of things and feel free to respond. The first is, I don't want anyone who's listening to believe that the studies we have before us and the ones Bernie cites are some sort of once-over easy effort. This has been going on for a long time with 2 different engineering firms to be sure we're getting real numbers back. So, I mean, do you challenge that the validity of what's been done?
No,
okay, so
not at all.
All right,
All those experts have gone through that and said it's unknown.
No, they didn't say
No.
that. They said the concept of modifying mid-lot access to allow right and left turns out and act as a new entrance point has both benefits and unknowns. That is different from the very clear conclusion that the level of service and the capacity analysis with the exit to the new intersection at Grant, Memorial Plaza, and Manville, currently 1 lane in, 1 lane out, now 2 lanes out, including a dedicated right turn lane, is by every analysis vetted by 2 different engineering firms going to work at a similar level of functioning that it works right now. So,
But that doesn't,
Right.
okay, that is not addressing the issue of the internal circulation.
so-
of Memorial
But
Plaza.
in that section, they're referring specifically to the entrance and the egress from the middle of the lot, which is something I feel like is still in discussion. The pedestrian committee has expressed some concerns about the impact on the crosswalk as well. But that's also, as they point out here, if those conflicts become problematic, the access here can be easily modified. One of the advantages to that particular piece is that there's some flexibility there.
Okay.
well, the other point I want to make is I think the numbers are very clear that, at the moment we have, I think, 105 permit spaces on that side. Have I got that number right? On the permit side of Memorial Plaza? So I mean, what's happening right now, and we just heard from George, and I can tell you I see it almost every day of my life, is come evening rush hour, it isn't 105 cars leaving. There are already 30, 40 cars that have come at 3 o'clock and are now parked for the whole night. So yes, there are these episodic moments, a train arrives, folks want to leave. I've stood there and watched it many times, perhaps you have too. There's that moment when you wish there were a better circulation for folks to drop off, for folks to pick up, for people to wait. You wish people would pull into an empty space when there is one to wait instead of waiting in the drive aisle. All those things have been going on forever, and I assure you that we would fix them if we could. But even in the current environment, we don't have a way to fix them. But we're not talking about that many cars leaving at any given moment. It's not like 100 cars are leaving, all wanting to leave at the same time.
Well, okay, then. I do get the impression, and forgive me if I'm wrong, that you've made up your mind about this traffic study.
We've made up our mind to say, I'll speak for myself.
Yeah.
I can't speak for anyone else. Here's where I am. I've spent quite a bit of time with this. I've spent quite a bit of time with HVEA, as has Eric. I've participated in a face-to-face meeting with the team from HVEA, several of their engineers, and 2 folks from FP Clerk. And then we've had FP Clerk look at all of this. We've had comments from you, which we have asked them to respond to. We've had comments from a couple of other people, including a local resident who's a traffic engineer. And, you know, we've gotten to the point where folks say, sure, can you say with 100% certainty that there'll be no issue? You can't, but I feel like we've gotten to a level of scientific certainty that we're not going to create a 5-star mess. And honestly, there are plenty of times right now when we have unhappy circumstances. There are going to be some people who, in a given situation, based on where they park or what their schedule is, will be inconvenienced. Will it be a 5-star traffic mess? This study, vetted by an outside entity, says definitively no. So I personally am satisfied with that.
All right, as I said, then I think it's important to understand what those numbers are on that.
Okay, so, and I totally support that. If you're able, if you could just dash off a quick informal email to Eric Morrissey, he'll make sure HVEA gets that, and we know for sure the right answer to the question you have asked.
Just as we've talked about all these studies for the traffic. Was there a study ever done about pedestrian safety? Was there a study done to show, I mean, I know Insight made the recommendation in 2007 that, you know, to make it more pedestrian convenient, that you close the slip. But we've been talking, I think, throughout all these public hearings about pedestrian safety. Was there a study about pedestrian safety?
So the pedestrian safety circumstances are simply what we have observed. Has anyone been killed there? No. Is it a good situation? I think it would be very hard to argue that it's a good pedestrian situation there. Do you feel otherwise?
No, but I think what you're doing is you're waving about this big change to the village over on the basis of pedestrian safety. So if there is no pedestrian safety issue, you're making a change for pedestrian convenience.
I mean, do you mean there's no pedestrian safety issue because no one has died?
I'm gonna.
Well, you cross street every intersection then would qualify as an issue of pedestrian safety, right?
I'm going to say that.
And you have to be careful about crossing the street.
The Manville Road project grew out of a pedestrian safety study and a pedestrian safety grant that Patty made way back when, and there was some work done down by what was then Key Food, and there was some sidewalk and traffic adjustments made for pedestrian safety purposes.
All of that done when you were mayor, right?
The Manville Road project that we have been developing is all a result of that study from back then, and the proposals that came forward, 10 years ago, and now coming to fruition because we have a grant, and yes, we're going to contribute to it, but that's all about safety, and particularly the shortening of crosswalks by bumping out corners of sidewalks is a big part of that, and there's a lot more design that goes into it, but part of that design was removing the slip lane, because yes, walking from the train track side of Memorial Plaza to get over to the diner or the post office and so on, it's hazardous no matter which way you go. But the project that we're proposing for the civic space, in my view, is not being designed specifically. Removing the slip lane is for pedestrian safety. Designing the civic space, in my mind, is not a pedestrian safety project. It's a civic amenities project. I do think it will improve pedestrian safety, though, in the sense that if you're on the train track side of Memorial Plaza, you're up near Manville Road, or when you come out of the train station and you want to get over to Starbucks, there's going to be a sidewalk going all the way out to Memorial Plaza Road, and from there, there's a crosswalk across Memorial Plaza Road over to the diner. That's what's on the drawing board right now. So, I don't feel like we've designed or working on this civic space project in order to improve pedestrian safety in that location, but I do think that there will be an absolute clear clearly a pedestrian safety benefit as a result of it. It's more of an ancillary benefit.
I suppose where I'm coming from is that it seems to me that the commuter and commuter parking are being looked at as a nuisance to the village, taking away important space within the village that should be used for other purposes. And there's been no commuter advocate, it seems to me, in this whole process. And I think, in my personal opinion, it is the commuter, the train, and the parking space that is the backbone of the village. Because if you really damage that, it's going to affect houses, it's going to affect tax collection, it's going to affect a lot of things. So I think that this is the most serious change that's being proposed, and that's why I'm trying to be very particular about it. And I also wondered if you thought about, was a lot of discussion when you present to a group of people saying we'd like to have a civic space, no one's going to say, I don't want a civic space. And there's been discussions, well, in the evening we're going to have movies. In the evening we're going to have a lot of activities. So, I mean, I don't know if anybody's considered that that's going to people are going to come down for these activities and compete with the parking spaces that you want to give to the businesses, to the burns, to the restaurants. So, you got to think about what kind of regulation you're going to have. Are you going to rent the space? You're going to rent the civic space for private events as a moneymaker for the village. There's going to be more parking competing with all the businesses that you're trying to preserve.
So could I just respond to your first comment? And that is, again, I'll speak for myself, but I think I can speak for this board and for the folks who have been on this board and have since left it, who were involved in the genesis of this project. It is beyond untrue that we're disinterested in the commuter. I've spent a big chunk of my life as a commuter. I know what that experience is like. I know how important it is for folks who commute to the city to have a reasonable place to park. And what we seek here is a rebalancing, which is to say, we've got a bunch of problems here, and we've got to find a way to balance them all. So if we lose the 43, 45 parking spaces that are proposed to be lost by the civic space are partly commuter spaces and partly transient spaces. We have already acquired 18 new spaces just a couple of months ago in the Hobby Street lot, which is an extremely close walk to the train station. Again, I get it that folks would rather park closer, but it is our goal and expectation that between the spaces that we believe we're going to secure as shared spaces at the new 70 Memorial Plaza project and in some other initiatives, that we're going to be able to accommodate replacement of these spaces. And then we hear what we heard from George tonight about some of the other aspects of the parking dynamics, including observations that we have already made ourselves, and you may not see it. I have a window view of it from my day job office. There are lots of things going on in the parking dynamics of this community that have nothing to do with commuters, but are getting in the way of commuters and getting in the way of shoppers and all of that. If we could accommodate everybody 100% of the time, we would do it. What we're trying to do here is find a way to balance these various needs. And, probably realistically, there are some folks who are going to have to get pushed out further to the fringes, are going to have to pay for parking that it was free. A decent percentage of those people are people who don't live here. We don't sell permits to folks who live out of town. Not that we wouldn't if we had a supply, but I do not think that folks that have been used to a convenient commute in Pleasantville are going to find themselves deprived of it. And I can tell you that if I thought that was the case, I wouldn't vote for it. So I really have to push back at your initial comment.
I'm not saying, okay, I'm not here to argue with you. Has there been a estimate as to the annual cost of maintaining the park?
We don't have an estimate. One of the activities we have tonight is to announce and ratify the appointment of a new Parks and Rec Superintendent, Matt Trainor, who will be joining our team shortly, replacing the retired Linda Bellafato. Matt is, I think, going to be a great resource for us on many levels, but one of the appealing aspects of his experience is quite a bit of experience in managing spaces like this. So,
Do you anticipate any increased cost to the police department in having to patrol the park?
I don't anticipate increased cost to the police department. I do anticipate some increased cost to the Parks Department.
And is the mixed use, you talk about sharing spaces, is that before the planning commission for approval? Is that part of that?
Well, that
Their-
project
their-
70 Memorial is before planning right now.
Is
and
the sharing part of that
It
application?
will ultimately obviously have to come to them because, I mean, what the circumstance we're in right now is that depending to some degree on the experience of the demolition of the rock, there's some variability in how far down they may dig and how many spaces they may have. But per George's comment, and that will get folded into the Planning Commission review, the Planning Commission obviously has to be comfortable that the spaces dedicated to 70 Memorial are sufficient to accommodate its needs. The overflow of that, so long as it's defensible in all of our eyes, including the Planning Commission eyes, would present the opportunity for shared parking.
One of the things, Peter, I don't know if you remember that, I think it was 2004, we put together a map. You may want to go back to that parking map that we looked.
You mean the customer-oriented one?
I don't know if it was, it was
Yeah.
just, it was to designate where
Right.
parking was. You might
Yeah.
want to go back and look at that.
I mean, as you know, it happened in your many years on this board too, conditions change on us for reasons that are sometimes hard to divine. I mean, for example, the demand for permits in recent years has ebbed and flowed. We've had moments when they sell out very fast, and then we've had moments when there are some lots with available permits well into the selling season. And you know, you wouldn't think that would happen in an environment where there is demand, but part of it is people, perfectly understandably, are cost conscious, and there are a whole lot of people, human nature, I don't say it as any form of criticism, that are looking to park for free in the downtown during the day if they can, and are willing to engage some histrionics in the course of the day about moving their car to make it happen. So it's not like we're trying to chase them to make their life harder, but you know, one interesting point, folks have talked to me, and quite rightly so, that you know, on a Friday night when the restaurants are hopping, God, you know, the Memorial Plaza is packed. So if it turns out that a piece of Memorial Plaza is packed with cars that are there for 48 hours, probably there's a better place for them to spend 48 hours than in the place that would be really convenient for folks to go to restaurants. So, you know, we're trying to balance all these needs, but without question, commuters are a key constituency for us.
Well, as I said, this project to me is the most impactful project, I think, as far as the entire village is concerned, that I can remember since I've lived here. And that's why I press these questions.
Understood.
It's not to be, you know, it's not
I
to say
appreciate that. I
But
know.
if you say that if you say
I know
you
where you
studied
come
this,
from. Right.
I am responding to what's in the public record. And I am concerned tonight that you look at those numbers and you don't know what they are.
Stop. What I said is, I don't want to speak for Hudson Valley Engineering. I think we should make sure they speak for
those numbers
themselves.
have to be critiqued and analyzed, not just by the traffic consultants, but by the village, the board especially, as to what those are. Because I look at it and say, you've got 149 cars going to the slip lane and 110 going into Manville, the Grant Street intersection, and now you're going to close the slip lane and the level of service is the same.
But it's over a period of time.
With a right.
Well, okay, but
Right.
I'm saying is that we're talking about 2 hours. Now, I don't, in the evening, it was from 4 to 6,
Right.
right? So we're talking about 120 minutes. So if you have another 140 cars, that's a car a minute. And you're saying that only 2 cars are going to be waiting at the intersection. I think if you look at the numbers, and I'm saying I'm not a traffic expert, but you look at the numbers and a lot of questions arise, and I hope that you also look at it very critically and get some answers before voting on it. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
understood.
you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yes, my name is Tom Rooney at 26 Hillview Drive. I've been here before in the last couple of meetings. I'll make this brief. I don't want to talk about parking spaces right now because I know if you go in the records, you'll know what my feelings are about those. I'm just saying that I'm glad that the town has $2+ million in their budget that could be spent on good projects. That's good for the town. What's not good for the town is to spend money just because you have it on projects that many believe are not necessary or needed. This whole green space downtown, in many opinions, and some of them were here last 2 weeks, I think I'm here, there's a gentleman behind me who shared my opinion today. That money could be so better spent on other things other than to create a space that we do not need in this town. You can make the parking, you can make the pedestrian problems better. You could take that money from the state that they've allocated to us, fix those problems. It still won't address the concerns that Bernie Gordon has about is it adequate, but that's for another discussion. But as said before, you don't have to add good money where it doesn't have to be spent. Take the state's money, fix those roads, make them pedestrian safe, and then take our money that we have saved in this village, which is our taxes here, and you people live in this town, they're ridiculously high. It's forcing many people out. The people that have been here forever and have seen these changes are the ones that are getting beat up on all these new projects. It's not fair, and it's not right, because I hope that I'm wrong on this, but after this green space is built, and it's pretty obvious that it's a done deal, even though last time that wasn't what you said, I'm hoping that it's being used. I don't really see that you're going to see that there's going to be mothers with their children playing in that field in those new areas all the time. In between, the cars in the other side of the plaza, the railroad tracks, the transients coming and going on and off of the trains, I just don't see it. Our other fields are in need of repair. So take that money and fix those and make those our new community green spaces. We have that nice park over on West Corridor. It's underutilized. Take that money and make that what you want to do here. It's just something that with the monies that we have, doing all that, it's just something else that the town is going to have to maintain. The DOT is going to have to, our department works guys are going to have to work doubly hard to keep that in order. And I said before, but it was shot down, this should be a referendum so that the Village of Pleasantville's people can vote and say, I think it's a good idea, or it's not a good idea, just like we do on a school vote, when there's a referendum to build a new part of the school building. It's always by a referendum. It's not because the people sitting on the school board think it's a good idea. Possibly it is a good idea. So ask the public, we'll vote on it. And if it wins, it wins. If it loses, it loses. But at least it was fair. This proposition, the way that it's works, it's not fair. It's just everybody's opinion, and then you do it your way. And that's pretty much what you told us last time, that it's pretty much done. It's been in the works for years. Well, I have people, newer people that moved on to my block within the last year and a half. I told them about this. They had no idea this was going on. Now, not everybody is into Facebook, not everybody is in the Moms of Pleasantville and the Pleasantville page. So if you don't know, you don't know. So ignorance is bliss, and I guess that will help some. But I just wanted to be known on the record that this is a multifaceted project. One is safety, and then one is just beautification. Nobody's against beautification, but don't do it here. Do it on the spaces we already have that already need help. I mean, the gentleman before me said something about AstroTurf on the fields. A lot of towns have AstroTurf on the fields. It's a good idea. Better way of spending money than on something we don't need. And briefly, on the gentleman who did their survey on the downtown parking situation, I can't see how charging more money on a parking space is going to help anybody who lives in this village. It's just ludicrous. You take other towns like Briarcliff and Chappaqua, there's not a parking meter in the town. And their downtown strives. So maybe we should look at them.
I can tell you Chappaqua is doing a lot of talking about trying to revive their downtown.
Well, that's because you can't drive through it right now.
We're in the-
hopefully that'll get better when you
Believe me,
get there.
blessings and curses are always wrapped up together. We're in the happy circumstance that Pleasantville is a place lots of folks want to be for lots of reasons. That's a great story, but it's not an easy story to manage. So,
Okay. I just wanted to say my piece and say that not everybody's in favor of the green space, and I would say everybody would be in favor of pedestrian safety. From there, it's in your hands. Thank you.
understood. Thank you, Tom.
Okay.
Other speakers? All right, so I think our next step will be to adjourn the public hearing again.
I'm wondering, why would we adjourn the public hearing again? I know Bernie asked a few very good questions, and I don't disagree, but we have to refer them to HVA engineering and so on. But I feel like we've exhausted the public comment on this secret process. I mean, we can answer those questions and get those answers and provide them to Bernie and get them for us as well. But I'm just...
So what I would say about that is I don't see a downside to adjourning it to the 25th. Get Bernie the answers to the questions, to confirmation of those numbers. And I can report that we got a couple of emails today, for example. Absent some imperative to close it, I would adjourn it.
It's not an imperative, it's just, 3 times and carry on forever. It just seems...
Not forever.
It seems like it's just rolling.
Right.
But it's okay.
Okay.
We'll adjourn.
All right, then is there a motion to adjourn the public hearing to a continuation on Monday, February 25?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. Thank you all, and let me remind anyone in the audience or anyone watching, pleasantville-ny.gov. Eric, you'll put all this under the Master
tab.
Plan Project tab?
Yes.
Okay. Just describe to people.
Initiatives on the homepage.
Okay. Great. Back to the resolutions, we did numbers 21 and 22 regarding the marijuana legislation. We're now at 23. That would be you, Joe.
Just a moment to get it back up. 23. Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby authorizes the village administrator to execute and deliver the intermunicipal agreement with Westchester County for organic waste effective April 1, 2019 through March 23, 2023, and a copy of the IMA is attached.
Joe, could I just add one thing? Could we have a further resolve that this is a type 2 action under SECRA?
Further resolved, this is a type 2 action under SECRA.
Is there a second?
Second.
Eric, this is a renewal of our agreement for trash hauling?
For organic waste,
Right.
leaves and the like.
Right.
So we need to submit a SECRA designation as part of that.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Motion approved. 24, Nicole.
Whereas NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, is the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization dedicated to building better lives for the millions of Americans affected by mental illness through increased awareness. And whereas NAMI of Westchester runs a ribbon campaign every year throughout Westchester to help promote awareness about mental illness and to encourage people to get the assistance they may need, now therefore be it resolved, the Board of Trustees hereby approves the request from NAMI of Westchester to place ribbons on trees, light poles, and the village gazebo in the business district in conjunction with their ribbon campaign beginning May 1st through May 31st, 2019.
Is there a second?
Second.
This repeats a campaign they've done some years running. Any comments, questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion approved. 25, Steve.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the mayor's appointments of the following persons to commissions and boards. To the Planning Commission for a 3-year term to expire in April 2022, Henry Leva. And on the Architectural Review Board, a 3-year term to expire April 2022, Eric Brotherton.
Is there a second?
Second.
Spelling correction, Leyva is L-E-Y-V-A. These two folks have both volunteered in their services. Henry Leyva, a village resident who's been very involved in various subjects and expressed an interest in the Planning Commission and visited us, and we were pleased to take advantage of his services. Eric Brotherton is a relatively recent arrival in the village and a registered architect, which fills a gap on our Architectural Review Board. All in favor?
Aye.
I have a recusal. I have a transaction with Eric Brotherton, so
Unrelated to the village.
unrelated to this and unrelated to the village altogether, but I'm going to recuse myself on it.
All right. Motion approved. 3 ayes with 1 abstention. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Henry. We look forward to your service on these boards. Number 26. Joe.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby appoints Matthew Trainor, effective February 25, 2019, to the job title Superintendent of Recreation, job title code number 0260, at a salary of $110,000 through May 31st, 2020. Said appointment is subject to a probationary period of not less than 12 weeks and to a maximum of 52 weeks. The employment offer and the employment agreement are attached.
Is there a second?
I have a question.
We need a second first.
Oh,
Okay, got
sorry.
it. Okay.
Superintendent of Recreation, we're not folding Parks and Rec, or is that a separate issue?
No, the plan is to fold it.
Okay, so but we will do that subsequently.
The official
Civil
title.
service.
The civil service
title is
okay.
Superintendent of
All right.
Recreation, and the duties will include
I see.
supervision of park staff.
Okay.
So as mentioned earlier, Linda Bellafato has retired, and we, led by Eric and Noreen, went through an extensive interview process. Quite a few candidates applied, quite a few were interviewed. Matt rose to the top and comes extremely well recommended. Because of his skills and this opportunity, we're going to fold Parks maintenance back into Parks and Rec, which is, I think, a great scheme, and we look forward to having his enthusiastic services on behalf of the Village of Pleasantville, and look forward to introducing him to all of you soon. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. 27. Nicole.
Sorry, it's loading slowly. Really super slowly. Okay. Resolved that the pre-check register dated February 11th, 2019, covering check numbers 92286 to 92463 is hereby approved as listed below. General Fund, $243,082.02. Water Fund, $38,678.68. Capital Fund, $2,925.06. Refuse Fund, $15,933.33. Trust Fund, $700 for a total of $319.09.
Is there a second?
Second.
Comments or questions on the check register? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved.
28.
28.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby approves the minutes from the village board meeting on January 28th, 2019.
Is there a second?
Second.
Comments or corrections to the minutes?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. We're just ripping through him here. 29. Joe.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby designates the following locations as polling places for the village election, March 19, 2019, from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Designating location Village of Pleasantville Recreation Department, 48 Marble Avenue, Pleasantville, New York 10570, and the Emmanuel Lutheran Church, 197 Manville Road, Pleasantville, New York 10570.
Is there a second?
Second.
And the offices are Village Justice?
Yes, just the one.
Right, that is the sole position up, a vote for Village Justice. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
Aye.
motion approved. Number 30, Nicole.
Resolved that the Board of Trustees hereby accepts the resignation of Benjamin Scherer, intermediate clerk part-time, effective June 13th, 2014. And the resignation letter is attached.
Is there a second?
Second.
I suppose I should recuse myself on this vote. My son's resignation from his part-time job scanning documents 4.5 years ago.
He's moved on.
This is fulfilling Noreen, to her eternal credit, is dotting I's and crossing T's in the history of our civil service life.
We have to have a record that he resigned, preferably from the person himself.
You can imagine what he said to me when I said, Ben.
You gotta resign from your position of 5 years ago.
So I will recuse myself from that vote, since after all, I'm his father, but I do know that he resigned. I saw him sign the letter in my presence. All in favor?
Aye.
I'll abstain. Motion approved. He has been relieved of duty effective 2014.
Let the record show.
Number 31.
31, resolved that the following budget amendments are hereby approved as listed below. We're going to appropriate fund balance of the general fund for $40,000 for account transfer to capital, the Recreation Center 2 Lake Street renovations, and we're increasing revenue and expense in the capital fund in the same $40,000 interfund transfer from general fund over to Recreation Center 2 Lake Street renovations.
Is there a second?
Second.
So this reflects the conversion of our building on Lake Street from its former use as a pump station and then storage space to include much improved conditions, new HVAC, and a home for PCTV. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. Any further comment, new business? That being the case, is there a motion to go into executive session on matters of personnel and real property?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all. We will see you in 2 weeks on February 25.